If you look at his statistics, certainly compare his statistics and my statistics, I'm sure quite a few of you are wondering who did he vote for in last year's European elections. The current hot debate in German politics is the question as to whether the voting age should be reduced from 18 to 16. And in this video I'm going to look at the ins and outs, who's in favour, who proposed it, who's against it, look at my opinions, want to ask you your opinions, whether it's a good idea or not. Let's find out. Do you know that it's now 50 years ago that the government led by Willy Brandt reduced the voting age from 21 to 18 here in Germany on a campaign based on more democracy? Well, it's true, 50 years, and now the debate is as to whether the age should be reduced to 16. This is a proposal from the Minister for Family and Youth, Franziska Giffey of the SPD. She is the minister in the Grand Coalition. The Grand Coalition, of course, being made up of the two main parties, CDU, together with their partners in Bavaria, CDU, CSU, and SPD. The SPD, having lost again and lost a lot of votes at the last election, were originally going to go into opposition, which I thought at the time was a good idea. I think it was a time for a change. Certainly if I were a member of the SPD, which I'm not, that would have been my wish. I think it's time, certainly, for some form of really energetic opposition, a large party in Parliament opposing the CDU rather than just being CDU light and kind of working together. The Grand Coalition for me is dead. It really should not have carried on, but obviously we've got them again for another 4 years. Let me know what you think. Should the SPD have gone into the opposition as they originally had planned to do? Does politics need a big shake-up in Germany? There are, of course, issues on which the two traditional opponents do not agree, and it was Franziska Giffey that said it was her proposal to reduce the voting age from 18 to 16, and she said, "Ich bin überzeugt davon, dass junge Leute mit 16 sehr wohl in der Lage sind, eine verantwortliche Wahlentscheidung zu treffen." So she is completely convinced that 16-year-olds are capable of making a responsible voting decision. That is her grounds for making this proposal for the change. She went on to say, "Wir sollten ihnen die Möglichkeit geben. We should give them this chance." And she also had the backing of her own party leader, Saskia Esken, and also from the party leaders of the Linke and the Green parties. The SPD, with this proposed change, is also suggesting not only that the active voting right but also the passive voting right should be changed, reduced to 16 years of age. That means you can not only vote for a candidate, but you can also become a candidate yourself at 16. At the moment, for both, it is of course 18. SPD leader Saskia Esken said this should apply to all types of elections. So Kommunalwahlen, they would be the equivalent of the municipal local council elections in the UK, also for the European Union elections and national elections for the Bundestag, the parliament in the German federal Parliament in the Bundestag. Robert Habeck of the Green Party also said, "We live in a time in which young people are maturing earlier, and it's a time that the legislators recognise this and allowed younger people to vote." Katja Kipping, the leader of the party Die Linke, also agreed and just said simply, "It is höchste Zeit, it's high time that we allow 16-year-olds to vote." So there is certainly some consensus from the parties on what you could traditionally call the left wing of politics in Germany, with the Greens, Die Linke and the SPD all in favour. Robert Habeck of the Green Party goes even further and says he'd like to see that as early as the Bundestagswahl in 2020. It should be introduced by then. And he also says that, he quite rightly points out that at Kommunalwahl level, so in regional, local, municipal and local council elections, the voting age in many areas is already 16. We have got a Kommunalwahl coming up here in North Rhine-Westphalia. We go to the ballot box on the 13th of September this year to elect, here in our case in Dortmund, to elect our new Oberbürgermeister and the Stadtrat for the city of Dortmund. And I was looking online yesterday, and indeed the voting age is 16. I presume the passive voting age is also 16. So in theory, you could be the candidate at the age of 16 and become the town mayor, the city mayor, Oberbürgermeister of Dortmund at the age of 16. It's not going to happen. I don't think there are any candidates. I still have to look at all our candidates. I do not know them. In fact, this is going to be a first for me. This is going to be the first time I've ever voted in a Kommunalwahl in Germany, which is really strange considering that I have lived here for... How long have I lived here for now? Bear in mind that all EU citizens who are resident in Germany have a right to vote at Kommunalwahl level. So as a British citizen before Brexit, I would have been able to vote at Kommunal level, but I somehow managed to miss loads and loads of elections just by chance. When I arrived in 1999, I think there were immediately elections. I remember meeting the mayor of Bochum outside the stadium, actually, as he was campaigning. I was fresh in Germany, just arrived in Germany again, and I'd not been here, registered here long enough, it seems, and wasn't eligible to vote. Then come 2003, when there were local elections again, I was actually planning to leave Germany. I was out of the country for a few weeks, and I think during the whole process of moving, I missed out on another set of elections. And I know the other election that you can vote as an EU citizen living in Germany from another country is the Europawahl, the European Parliament elections, of course. You can opt to vote in the country of residence or in your home country, depending on your preference. We did, of course, have European elections in 2019, last year. The European elections before that, that was 2014, we were still living in Spain. So I voted in Spain and actually voted in Germany for the very first time. It was at the European elections last year in 2019. So this is going to be a first for me, voting locally at the Kommunalwahl. So I'll make sure to make my choice wisely and place my cross by the candidate that I can fully support. I'm actually very, very much looking forward to it. I think it's something that I genuinely find exciting and interesting. I think political participation, getting involved, is very, very important. And it will be my second time voting as a German citizen. There are, of course, opponents to the proposed changes, and of course, you can imagine, whereas it's the parties traditionally to the left that are in favour, it's the parties to the right who are going to be against it. I have a quote here from CSU General Secretary Markus Blume, so the Christian Unionists leader in Bavaria. He says it's tried and tested that becoming Volljährigkeit, he says, so Volljährigkeit is becoming full adult age at the age of 18, and voting rights have always been gekoppelt, so linked. He quite rightly points out that you are entitled to your Führerschein, your driver's license, at the age of 18, and that you are the age of criminal responsibility is also 18, and suggests that all these things should be linked together. He says das ist auch der richtige Maßstab für das Wahlrecht als oberstes Recht in der Demokratie. So that says it's the right yardstick, the right measuring stick for the right to vote as the highest privilege in democracy. He then goes on to say something that I think is particularly revealing about the true motivation behind their opposition to this. And I think I'm going to conclude, in my conclusion, is going to say something more about why the parties of the left and the Greens are in favour, and I'm sure the CDU are going to come out against this just as much as the CSU. The Conservative parties are going to be against it. He says that, quite rightly too, probably, that the youth of today is more involved in politics than ever, and he draws attention to the climate movement. I think he's talking about the Fridays for Future movement. He doesn't specifically address it, but he says that how youth are involved in that. They have a particular political involvement, and he says that the climate movement, the climate protests are evidence that that the voting right is not the only way to become particularly involved, that it's a very he says here, in vielfältiger Weise, so in a very varied manner you can be involved in politics. Why I say that is particularly revealing is that I think at the end of the day, I'm going to put on my cynical hat, this comes down to power. Politics is all about power and how to gain power. If you look into surveys over the years, I think you will repeatedly see that young people are more likely to vote for parties who back more social justice, parties typically of the left, and certainly today any party with a more ambitious, more radical environmental policy, so parties looking really to change the economic model, the energy model, much more quickly than the traditional parties at the moment. Sorry to interrupt the video, but just a quick reminder that if you are enjoying the content and you haven't done so yet, please do subscribe to the channel and give me a thumbs up. Also, comment away. Every little helps to push the channel a little bit further, my little channel. And also, if you want to support the channel further and help me continue creating this content, please check out the link down in the description, the link to my Patreon channel. You can become a supporter there and get access to some exclusive content. Now on with the video. The SPD is in the grey area there. I think with its traditional, more social democratic policies, it would benefit from more votes from 16-year-olds. But we're certainly looking now at the Green Party, and I've got some statistics I'd like to bring up there. I have this chart, it was published in Die Welt, in the newspaper, and it shows what age groups voted for which parties at the last European elections in 2019, where it was of course a very successful election for Green Party throughout Europe. To be honest, but particularly here in Germany, the Green Party enjoyed really good results. I think nothing points out my argument better than the two contrasting graphs of it's there as Union, so the CDU, CSU, and the Green Party, their particular curves. We see the 18 to 29-year-olds, by far, the Green Party is the most popular party. Also now, for the first time, with the 30 to 44-year-olds, slightly ahead of the CDU and CSU. They're neck and neck at 45 to 59. The Union just getting ahead, and then when it comes to people of 60 years and older, there is a big discrepancy, even bigger than the discrepancy between the 18 to 29-year-olds, obviously in the opposite direction. That is, for me, the graph that shows the motivation behind all the parties' stances. The parties that are in favour of lowering the age, although they will consistently back it up with moral reasoning, as will the right-wing parties, the CDU and CSU, they will back it up with their own particular arguments and logic. I see the logic on both sides to the arguments. They're well-formed arguments, but I think the main motivation is basically this: power. Parties want power, parties need votes. If the voting age is lowered to 16, the parties which are going to benefit most strongly are the parties on the left, particularly now with the Fridays for Future movement, the Green Party. It's very much a movement that is dominated by children and young people who are not of voting age yet, but a lot of those, say in sixth form age, Oberstufe, they're already 16, 17, and not quite 18, not voting age yet. Imagine how many young people having the vote tomorrow where they could generally make a change. And their votes are really not going to go to the right-wing parties. I think if you look at the analytics, the statistics, for example, for well-known German YouTuber Rezo, who is famous, of course, for doing the video about the destruction of the CDU, Zerstörung der CDU. Very well-made video, to be honest, but look at his demographics, if you look at his statistics, certainly compare his statistics and my statistics, he will have a large chunk of his viewers in that age range, the 13s to 16. I think it's broken down. Certainly 13 to 18 year olds, they will be watching him. They don't watch me. And all those Rizzo fans are not going to be going out voting for the CDU. I said I wanted to tie this in, draw some parallels with my home country, the UK, between the UK and Germany, and indeed there are very much the same kind of tendencies. Surveys over the years have repeatedly shown that the under 18s, 16-year-olds to 18-year-olds would tend to vote for the Labour Party, the Socialist, Social Democratic Party. It's a very broad church, the Labour Party. It really has a wide range of a wide political spectrum, but it was a left-wing party born out of the trades unions movement. So it's the left-wing party, occupies that side of the political spectrum in the UK, and those that would suffer from reducing the voting age to 16. The voting age, incidentally, in the UK is also 18. And it is traditionally the Labour Party that pushes for it being lowered. It's also very interesting to note that we've had, in the UK, in recent years, we've had two referendums. In 2014, there was a referendum on Scottish independence. The Scottish people eventually voting by a reasonably fine margin to remain in the UK. Now, in that referendum, the voting age was 16 years, so all 16-year-olds had the right to vote. And then, of course, 2 years later, we had the infamous Brexit vote. The UK as a whole eventually voting to leave the EU. They have now gone. Bye-bye UK. The voting age in that referendum, however, was 18. And at the time, this also did draw quite a lot of attention to this very question, because it was predominantly the younger voters that voted to remain in the EU, even in the areas, England and Wales, where the areas that really swung it. There is quite understandably some bad feeling in Scotland and Northern Ireland, where the people voted largely to remain in the EU. The perception being now that they are being forced to leave the EU by the English and the Welsh, where voters voted more in favour of leaving the EU. But the question of age, the voting age, it was quite clearly the younger people that voted to remain in the EU, and the older generation voted more in favour of leaving. There is evidence to suggest, statistics to suggest that even if the voting age remained the same and was 18, and there's a repeat of the referendum now, the UK would vote to remain in the EU. And this is simply a demographic question, in that in the 4 years that have passed since the referendum, a lot of the voters that voted to leave have actually died. A lot of the people that exercised their democratic right and essentially made a decision on the future of the UK are now no longer with us, whereas the younger people that voted against it are still there. That's how democracy works. Don't think this is a complaint. This is how things work. You can only have a freeze frame of the demographic at any given time, and we can't, of course, deny people the right to vote, whether they're going to be living 1 day more or 100 years more. But it also seems evident that had the voting age been 16, that the UK would probably also still be in the EU now. And it's here where I very much fall in line. I am very much on the side of the advocates for reducing the voting age to 16. I would also be in favour of it here in Germany. And in general, I think it's right that when they all say, in fact, I agree with all the politicians that I quoted, because they all pretty much they come to the same conclusion. There is a consensus that young people in that age are very involved in politics and they have a strong opinion. They come to a different conclusion as to how we should deal with that. General Secretary of the CSU, Markus Blume, of course, then says that they shouldn't have a voting right, that there are other ways to get involved. I find his argument actually the best formulated of all the arguments, and I think he did a very good job. I think it's quite right that he points out that this voting age has always been linked to other rights and privileges. For example, being criminally responsible, so You can't be sent to an adult prison at the age of 16 or 17, not until you are 18. And I think that's right. These things are linked. And I think you should probably also consider reducing that age. If people are given the right to vote at 16, then maybe they should also be criminally responsible. I completely understand that, but I am definitely in favour of more democracy. That was the slogan behind the Willy Brandt campaign in 1970. More democracy, even more democracy now for 16-year-olds. I, of course, recognise that my bias also plays a role with this. I would welcome more votes for parties more on the left side of the spectrum, so I am not without bias myself. I'm not going to deny it. And at the end of the day, that's going to be my main conclusion, that these parties are interested in what benefits them the most. That's how politics work. Political parties want power and political parties need votes. But I also cast my mind back to my youth, and in particular when I was 14 years old. At my school we had a mock election. There was a general election in the UK at the time, and one of our teachers organised a project, a mock election, in which we were all free to be candidates, and there was a vote. A mock election at our school. I actually decided to become the Labour candidate and got absolutely annihilated. I was living in a very going to school in a very conservative area, and the Conservative candidate completely annihilated me. I think he got over 250 votes and I had maybe 90, nearly 100 votes, and two other independent candidates didn't really get many votes at all. But it was a really great experience, and my point being that I was very informed. At the time I was only 14, but I was very interested, and I was encouraged to read the papers, inform myself and form my own political opinions, and I was very mature, as were they were certainly mature enough. All my co-pupils at the school who voted that day were capable of making their own political opinions, and I think certainly 16 is a good age. I also mentioned earlier that I think the Grand Coalition, I talked about the Grand Coalition, I think that it's tired. Politics really needs a shake-up. This Grand Coalition has gone on too long. We don't really have a strong opposition in Parliament. I think that's unhealthy. The most exciting things happening in politics are things like the Fridays for Future demos. These are the new impulses that we need for change. I also think I agree with Saskia Esken when she says things like climate policies, getting over the coronavirus pandemic, family policies, and the future for the occupational world, the world of work. These decisions have to be made together with young people. It's their future, and I also think, particularly when it comes to environmental politics, that we need something very, very new. In particular, when it comes to climate policy, when it comes to environmental policy and industrial policy, we need radical change very quickly, and that's not going to happen with parties in power, particularly when one is no longer in opposition. Parties that are in power that receive large donations that are really basically financed by big business, by all the big industries here in Germany. And it's in their interest really to slow down any economic changes that are going to push towards renewable energies and the real radical change that we need in order to keep this planet inhabitable for human beings. So anything that can accelerate this change, for me, is going to be good. Give young people the vote. Give those 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds the vote who are taken to the streets to push for those policies that might just save our little planet or save our human race. But as I say, this video is of course subject to my own bias. I have my own agenda, just like the parties are looking out for themselves, looking what was going to benefit them the most. I too have my own biases in politics. I'm sure quite a few of you are wondering, who did he vote for in last year's European elections? And the only thing I will say to that, the only clue I'll give you, is that I did not vote for the Green Party, and the reason for that was that their green economics and energy policies did not go far enough. They were not green enough for me. So comment down below if you think you know who I voted for, who that could possibly be. Also, what are your opinions on this? Should we lower the voting age to 16 and why? Comment down below. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please remember to like and subscribe. Every little helps. And also at this point I would like to thank my Patreon supporters. Your names are on screen now. Thank you very, very much as ever from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for your support. Your support helps me keep making these videos, keep this content free of charge on YouTube. Every little helps. Thank you very much. And of course, if you are not a Patreon supporter and you're interested in getting some of that exclusive content or just giving me a helping hand, check out the link in the description. Otherwise, I will see you here on YouTube again in the next video. Thanks again. Macht's gut, Leute.